I know I don't have this set right where to look like it ought to on the TV. Sorry about that.
Welcome to CNN this morning.
Thank you for getting up
Run
early,
out of
Brett.
We are learning new details about the suspected.
run out of space,
Mr.
and
Boot is
because of it,
notorious on feeling. Is there a threat to other countries now that he is a free
I'm
man?
having to use a different device to be able to record this, and I hope that it gets the recording like I am planning on getting this recording.
Happening now.
Because I've got some things that I need to say to my audience, if I can, if I may. Hopefully I can. All right. What we're going to be talking here is about a storm that is unlike anything that science and the meteorologist has ever seen. And they're basing it off of a 1977 storm, I believe, is what they're saying. But I've got some comments that I need to make as they're talking here.
This of epic proportion. That's how the governor of New York is describing the deadly winter storm in the western part of the state. Buffalo and other cities are struggling to dig out of 43 inches of snow and freezing temperatures and power outages. I'll talk with the Buffalo Police Commissioner this hour. Many Americans are still feeling the effects of the Arctic blast, including millions of air travelers. Southwest Airlines experiencing massive disruptions with more than 65% of its flights canceled just today, adding to the holiday travel chaos. Also tonight, Vladimir Putin claims he's ready to negotiate a solution to the Ukraine war. But a key Ukrainian official says the Russian president needs to get back to reality as Moscow continues to slaughter innocent civilians. Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room. We begin this hour with the deadly weather emergency in western New York. Governor Kathy Hochul is calling it, and I'm quoting her now, the blizzard of the century. And she's warning it is far from over. CNN's Polo Sandoval is joining us right now from my hometown, hard-hit Buffalo, New York. Polo, so what are the conditions there?
Well, Wolf, as predicted by Erie County officials, the total number of people who have lost their lives to this horrendous storm here in Buffalo has once again gone up. The total now 27 and expected to continue to rise. That figure already surpassing a death toll from that historic blizzard in 1977. That statistic is a certain grim reminder of the extraordinary nature of the storm.
This is the worst that we've had.
In Buffalo, New York, it's being called the most devastating storm ever.
We are in a war. This is a war with Mother Nature. And she has been hitting us with everything she has.
In a region that's used to harsh winter weather, this is worse.
We deal with snow all the time, but the conditions were different because with the gusts of wind, I could tell you firsthand, zero visibility. I couldn't see 2 feet in front of my vehicle.
Up to 43 inches of snow, hurricane force winds, and hundreds of vehicles stuck.
There's cars everywhere, pointing the wrong direction on roads.
Buffalo's roads still impassable in most areas.
It's just been crazy. I mean, a snowbank that's like taller than me on my front lawn.
More than 500 rescues. Some people were trapped in cars for days before they were found by rescue workers.
Going into homes, going into vehicles, and in too many tragic times finding people who did not survive the experience.
In the western New York region, power substations are frozen and the electricity is out. Thousands of people left without heat.
Conditions were deteriorating so fast, it was dropping in our home maybe about 2 degrees every 10 minutes.
One family trying to get their children to a warm hotel was rescued from their car by the airport fire department.
Demetrius says, he opened his window and said, please don't leave us. And I said, don't worry, man, I promise we won't leave you.
But elsewhere in the city, looters were taking advantage of the crisis.
People who are out looting when people are losing their lives in this harsh winter storm is just absolutely reprehensible.
And as Buffalo tries to dig out, more snow is in the forecast.
Even though it's been just 2 days, it feels like it's been 2 weeks.
And still here in Buffalo, this street a reminder that work is far from over, with many streets yet to be plowed. Authorities saying that they are working as fast as they possibly can, really approaching this in a very calculated way, making sure that some of the roads and some of the streets leading up to places like medical facilities are clear. They want to make sure that those roads are able to be used. Meanwhile, that driving ban, Wolf, that was put in place Friday morning, that will continue to be in place right now, making sure that they continue to work on these roads as they also make some progress with when it comes to some of those power outages, to restoring power to some homes.
Well, Polo, stay safe over there. We will be in touch with you. Polo Sandoval doing excellent reporting from Buffalo. Now to the holiday travel nightmare that's playing out across much of the United States. CNN's Lucy Kavanaugh is over at the Denver airport. Lucy, how bad is the travel picture today?
Yeah, I mean, this is what no fun at all looks like. Well, if you can see the massive line of people at the Southwest check-in counter, and I want to pan over here, the line continues. It goes all the way down this corridor, around the corridor, wrapping around where the TSA pre-check line is. A lot of the people here have been here for hours, if not days. Southwest is responsible for many of the cancellations here at Denver's airport. In fact, Denver has seen more than 450 canceled flights today. The bulk of those 411 coming from Southwest Airlines, and that is just Denver. The national travel picture also just as bad. It's having cascading effects. We're talking about nationwide, more than 3,600 cancellations, nearly 2,700 of those coming from Southwest Airlines, more than 6,000 flight delays across the nation. And this is a source of immense frustration, as you can imagine, to passengers who not only have to wait on these insanely long lines. I want to pan over here once again, I'm so sorry guys, to show just how long these lines are, but they're also not able to get through to Southwest on the phone. Take a listen what some of these passengers across the nation have been telling cameras. Listen.
There's no option to rebook anything online. Oh, I've also been on hold for 5 hours and 43 minutes.
Calling Southwest, calling the airlines, they're nowhere to be found. I actually got hung up on multiple times.
The problem is that Southwest, they don't give any answer. They don't answer the phone.
And Southwest has issued a statement saying that the storm, quote, forced daily changes to our flight schedule at a volume and magnitude that still has the tools our teams use to recover the airline operating at capacity. They have apologized for these delays, but of course, Wolf, this is cold comfort for passengers who probably were delayed from their initial travel, getting home to family, and now have to deal with this after the holidays. Wolf?
Awful situation indeed. Lucy Kavanaugh in Denver for us. Lucy, thank you very much. Let's go to the CNN Weather Center right now. Our meteorologist, Tom Sater, is joining us. Tom, what's the forecast for Buffalo and other parts of the country still feeling this very, very awful deep freeze?
Yeah, Wolf, I don't think most of the country is grasping what has happened here. I mean, this is staggering. Buffalo, 49.2 is going to have a few more added on to this, but only a few more. If you look at Watertown at 41, they could see another 10 inches or so. So they're all going to be over 50. Just 1 month ago, record-breaking lake effect snow event shattered records for the amount of snow that it fell. But with this one came the wind field, massive winds. Total now for Buffalo, 98.9. That's going to go up a little bit. That's more than they typically receive for the entire year. Buffalo and other areas off the Great Lakes pick up their lake effect snows early in the season. Until these lakes start to freeze over, these winds are picking up all that moisture and just depositing it. Now, Watertown is still under a warning. Buffalo is under an advisory right now, but their winds are still coming off Lake Erie. Lake Ontario actually is a deeper lake, so it holds more warmth, more moisture. It's just copious amounts of moisture getting pushed on.
All right, I want to say something right here in regards towards what they're talking about. And I'm not no professional, okay? I haven't went to college. I'm not a meteorologist. I'm not a scientist. When it comes to separating atoms, I'm not a medical person whenever it comes to various germs and etc. But I took notice. This is now the 26th of December, which is basically, we're 3 weeks now, a full 3 weeks into December. It wasn't until the second week of December, just about 10 days before Christmas, was whenever not only I took notice, but others took notice too as well, as far as the vegetation around here in this area finally giving up its vegetation, its full vegetation, basically kind of like a cat or a dog giving up its winter fur, or giving up its, its coat per se, and all the liquids drained down into the tree, down into the roots. It wasn't until about 2 weeks ago whenever it finally let go. A matter of fact, I heard somebody talking about their pecans, that they had never seen the pecans hang onto the trees for so long until about 2 weeks into December. Because you keep in mind, we'd already gotten down around 20 degrees here. Plus, we got a little bit of snow, and it stayed that way for 3 or 4 days. And that should have been ordinarily enough to triggered telling Mother Nature, hey, it's time for you to seek shelter, dig down into the innermost parts of the earth, because here comes old man winter. Well, our trees has been getting false images and been getting false signals because of the earth warming. Now, you may say this is just some sort of speculation or just some sort of an ideal. No, we know for a fact that the molten lava in the past few years has become more and more erratical towards spewing out in different areas of the earth. A matter of fact, give or take, about 70, maybe 80 volcanoes are active right now. The majority of them are down in the ocean, but the earth is spewing its energy from the inside, and the heat is radiating out. And I truly believe, I can't prove this, that the gravitational pull increased, and the reason why the gravitational pull increased about 1.5 years ago was because the centrifugal force increased below our feet. Now, we don't have machines that would tell you that. We don't have some sort of a guide that would tell you that, but that is what God has showed me. Now, getting back to what we're talking about right here. They know for a fact that these bodies of water right here are in between 3 and 5 degrees warmer than what they should be. So because they're warmer than what they should be, it's going to take that much longer for those bodies of water to freeze over, like he just got through talking about, as far as having a crust. That way the moisture is not being dragged in to the atmosphere and then spewed out in the form of snow. So your global warming, as crazy as this may sound, we have a tendency of wanting to look at the exterior. Say, well, it got like 5 below zero here in Northwest Tennessee one night, and then the other night was like 5 above, and etc. But whenever I was growing up, we had flash freezes. Wasn't nothing to get a flash freeze back whenever I was growing up in this area. The thing about it was, whenever it would get cold, it would stay cold. And it would stay cold sometimes till February or March. The ground would stay frozen. And if you didn't have your lines covered up good, if you didn't have everything covered up like it should be, you took a big chance on going through some problems with your water towards it freezing. Well, today, I was talking to a veteran who lives up by Hopkinsville, Kentucky, that I spent almost a year in jail with. He's in his 70s, and he was telling me how much that he's unprepared. And I asked him, well, Mr. Woody, how come you're that unprepared? You was in the Vietnam War. You know all of this stuff about survivalists. He said, because it has caught me off guard for the past few years. We hadn't had to become adapted to such cold, harsh winters. So I didn't have all my ducks in a row whenever it did in fact hit. Even I myself got my extra propane heater out, that actually you put a propane bottle in this heater and then turn it on. If just running one bay in this heater will almost run you completely, totally out of this trailer unless it gets right around zero. There's no way that I could burn all three at the same time. I don't forgot now what cubic feet that this stove is supposed to be for, but it will basically heat a whole house. Well, I thought that I had everything set up because I got extra propane here and I got different heaters here and there, that I thought that I had everything set up. And come to find out, in my business trailer, of course I had to have heat on it during this time. I had no idea that the plumbing would freeze going outside as far as the sewer. And it froze up and backed up, and I was fortunate that I caught it in time before it done extensive damage inside the trailer. But the bathtub, as of about 30 minutes ago, maybe 40 minutes ago, is still full almost to the rim, where I had the water dripping, and somehow or another during the night it got stopped up and froze up, and it wasn't no longer releasing the water, and it was holding the water at that point in time. Like I said, I got lucky, because I go out and I check my stuff every morning. Even though I don't feel like getting out there in the cold, I still get out there and make sure everything looks up to par. Even the unit that I'm living in right here, the first 2 nights I done all right because I left the water dripping a little bit. But the second night I failed to open up one of the cabinet doors, and it has frozen, I guess, going into the interior wall. And because of it, I've been without water now for about 24 hours right here where I'm at. Well, I've got extra storages of water. I've got all kinds of water stored up in various gallon jugs just in case of this very moment. So I am prepared. But let's get back to the principle of what we're talking right here now. Whenever the waters are warmer than what they should be, 3 to 5 degrees, it allows for that type of system, that arctical system, to come down and basically generate a snow machine. As it's drawing the moisture out of the heated water, the water that's warmer, it goes up into the atmosphere. Once it goes up into the atmosphere, then it comes down as snow. Like he was talking about this time, they had excess amount of wind with that has just been absolutely horrendous in people's lives. As a matter of fact, I just this morning made a telephone call to my Aunt Ruth, that lives, let me see here.
Radar, it is starting to dwindle somewhat.
I think that map will move here just in a minute.
Coming down Watertown and the surrounding counties. A surprise, maybe.
Right there. This is Michigan right here, and she basically lives right here on this very point. She's just about 45, 50 miles from the water's edge and about 45, 50 miles from Indiana. That's where she lives. And occasionally, she'll get hit real, real hard by the same atmosphere, depending upon how the wind is blowing, what way it's going. More than likely, these people up in here are the people that catch the bigger brunt of it. But even at that, I contacted her about a month ago. I said, Ruth, are you sure that you live in a stable enough house that will be able to withstand all that snow? Because snow, if you got 5 foot of snow on top of your house, that's probably the adequacy of about 2 18-wheelers up there. And if your house ain't built structurally sound enough to be able to hold that, all of a sudden your roof will give in and basically kill you. And if it don't kill you right away, towards a 2x4 knocking you in the head or stabbing you in the chest, you'll freeze to death before anybody has a chance to get over and get you. So it's very, very dangerous. But the point that I'm trying to make is this, pertaining to the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes has warmed up 3 to 5 degrees, which is causing the Great Lakes not to freeze near as quickly. And it's also causing the moisture systems that comes out of the North Pole to basically fuel this stuff to the degree that it just turns it into a snow machine. Now, TVA, that's one of the biggest power producing companies here in this particular area, basically starts out somewhere up in here and goes all the way down, goes down through here, and then it goes down through a river, and then it goes back up through here, and it comes up over at the Ohio River, and then the Ohio drops off into the Mississippi. Mississippi River goes basically, Mississippi River goes up through here, and then I guess it goes up through this way. Anyways, TVA put out a statement 48 hours ago that they was going to have massive blackouts because the air temperature was so severe that they couldn't create enough kilowatts to maintain the demand for the electricity. The cold weather is only part of it. The other part is that the state of Tennessee for the past 30 plus years has doubled in its population census, that we have went from about 2.5 to 3 million to now over 7 million people in the state of Tennessee. So we're automatically, even if it's not extreme weather, we're automatically putting a strain on the grid system pertaining to TVA. Whenever something like this comes down the pike, their system can't handle it. You know, it's the difference between having a transformer, let's say the size of a human body from the waist down, versus a transformer the size of an automobile. Well, the size of an automobile ain't going to get hot near as quickly, but it costs like 5 times more, or maybe even more than that, to have a transformer the size of an automobile versus a regular transformer that can basically create enough electricity to be able to monitor the wattage and the voltage and everything, that basically can heat and cool basically about, I'm going to say probably 20 homes. Whenever you have a strain on the resources with so many people, and you have all this cold weather come down all of a sudden, now you have a recipe for disaster. So the state of Tennessee, TVA, had no other choice other than to go through blackouts. Well, that's the same thing that they do out west, because once more, they're overpopulated and their systems being old and being run down. And plus, whenever it gets extremely, extremely hot out there, they basically got to do the exact same thing that TVA done just to be able to provide enough electricity to the vast majority of all the people, because if not, their system will go down. It basically melt down. It'll go bad, and it takes several days to boot it back up. Matter of fact, Texas went through the very same thing a few years ago. They basically lost almost 1,000 people that either froze to death or died of carbon dioxide towards people having generators too close to their house and basically killed them. So whenever you get to looking at the exterior of what has happened, you're going to say, oh, see there, they don't know what they're talking about pertaining to global warming. Trust me, we do know what we're talking about, because the weather has become so unstable. And I've told you this before, it's like a tug of war. You got cold versus hot, hot versus cold, and you got a piece of property on the North Pole that used to produce this amount of energy pertaining to the cold, that whenever it would get cold in America, it would basically freeze about half America. We ain't seen freezes like that since 1983. Since 1983, we have not seen ponds freeze over to the degree that you can walk on them and feel secure about walking on them. Now, because we've had this freeze in the past 3 or 4 days, there's probably some ponds that you could walk on if you was really, really small and you didn't weigh all that much, but I wouldn't trust them, because ordinarily a pond is not safe enough to walk on until the freeze stays frozen below 32 degrees for at least a week. It has to be at least a week before I would say that pond is safe enough to walk on. And at that, you still need to go out there and monitor it to make sure it's got about 3 inches of ice in it. And if it don't have 3 inches of ice in it, you don't need to get on it. You don't need to get on it. because it could very well break, and that could cause injury or people towards drowning, and I've heard of that happening. The point that I'm trying to make is this. People look at the exterior. They're not looking at the interior. The interior is the fact that these storms have become so erratical that whenever a massive whenever a massive Arctic front comes down through Canada, it is shoving itself so hard and so vastly because of the instability between the hot and the cold and the hot, tug of war game. It actually exceeds its momentum and goes all the way down into places like even Florida and Brownsville, Texas. Please listen to this.
All the way down into lower Tennessee, northern areas of Mississippi, Alabama. It's just a little clipper, but behind this clipper is going to reinforce that cold air, so it's going to be in place for a while. Now, things are going to change somewhat. Now, when we start to see these Great Lakes freeze over, that shuts off the lake effect snow machine for the year. But look at all of this, even up into Ontario.
But what I'm saying is, because the water is warmer, it takes it longer to freeze. Because it takes it longer to freeze, whenever these clippers does come down, oh man, it just turns it into a snow machine.
Ontario. I mean, this is widespread. This area of low pressure dropped to equivalent category 2. Pictures of Watertown, so that wind field was able to expand. So you had wind chill values that were minus 50, minus 60, minus 70. Right now, Buffalo, it feels like 7, Chicago 16, St. Louis 19. But now comes a dramatic warm-up. On the other side...
Well, he didn't mention this. They was actually having sustainable winds at over 80 mile an hour, which is hurricane force winds with the Great Lakes. That was just adding insult to misery to the degree that some of them people couldn't even see a foot in front of their face. It was that bad.
Warm front, incredible warmth. LA had their second warmest Christmas, 84 degrees. Miami had their coldest at 50. It was warmer in London on Christmas Day than it was down in Miami. So the temperatures in the teens are going to start to rebound. And here's where we're going to have problems with Buffalo. Lows in the 40s. We're already seeing pipes burst all over in many states. Memphis having problems. That's going to be the issue here. And urban flooding with the ice jamming up all of these roadways and, of course, the drainage spots. So, and it's not just Buffalo. A big warm-up is on the way. So we still have more problems ahead.
Seems like...
And whenever you have these warm-ups, these massive warm-ups, like out in Northern California, up towards the Sierras and Nevada and the Rocky Mountains, whenever you have these massive warm-ups, it will have a tendency towards doing like it done up towards Yellowstone a few years ago. Whenever it warmed up so quickly, it caused massive flash flooding to the point that the system couldn't, the rivers and the creeks and the streams couldn't take all of it at one time. Why is that? Why is that happening? Because the ecosystem below our feet has been tampered with by the petroleum oil companies. And the more they keep tampering around with what's underneath our feet, the more we're going to see outlandish weather events that's going to go from either extremely hot to extremely cold. And all of our planning pertaining to our engineers, pertaining to our architects, that is planned, in city planning pertaining to, okay, do we need a 3-foot washout system versus a 6-foot washout system? And I'm going to use this for a quick illustration. Waverly, Tennessee, going on now a year and a half ago, had massive flooding because of a storm that basically produced like 17 and a half inches of rain. Actually, it was more than that, but according to their figures, about 17 and a half inches of rain in a very short length of time. Under normal circumstances, because of their creeks and because of their flooding out reservoirs, it was supposed to have handled somewhat of a big rainfall. But what added insult to misery pertaining to Waverly, Tennessee, is that The railroad system had built up a levee to run their railroad up and down that basically worked just as what I'm talking about. It worked as a water levee, but then whenever that water levee gave in, and all of a sudden the railroad basically got cut in half, all that water that was up in other areas going towards Dixon come down into Waverly, and Waverly just could not handle it. And of course, whenever you hear the testimonies where people looks out 1 minute and they see where the water's about 6 inches high, and they go in and they pick up a few things and they walk back out and the water's 3 foot high, and before they get in their automobiles, it's already done pushing their automobile to the side, and within a matter of another 5 minutes, the water's actually pushing their house over, and the water is so strong it's basically turning into a river. People can't even begin to fathom just exactly how powerful that water is and how powerful Mother Nature is whenever it gets to acting irregular like this. And I still base off what's happening right now, and I'm sure other scientists will agree with me, that because of the earth warming up from the inside, we used to think that what was causing the earth to warm up was everything that was happening with the greenhouse effects pertaining to the ozone layer being broken down and all the carbon dioxide, all the gases going up into the atmosphere. Well, that was part of it. That was all part of it. But the other part that they failed to look at was that oil was put there in the ground for a heat shield, just like the heat shield that was put above our atmosphere. That way, if there was a major solar flare that was to hit the earth, possibly there would be enough of the greenhouse, the ozone layer, that would be able to withstand or kick off that radiation that could cause cancer or cause even death here up onto the planet. Our ozone layer has went from like 30 miles deep to now only 2 to 5 miles deep. And it's getting thinner every day. It is. It's getting thinner every day. And every day that goes by, we're becoming more and more vulnerable to where if there was ever a major direct solar flare coming from the planet Earth, coming from the sun, going to the planet Earth, a direct hit, it could possibly put us back into the prehistoric days towards frying every computer, every satellite, every automobile, every computer that we ever thought of, in addition to the cancer and the radiation that would be displayed all over the earth, in addition to possibly even causing fires, depending upon how strong that solar flare actually was. And of course, we have other things. I'm really surprised that the earth hadn't been bombarded already by some sort of major climatic activity pertaining to either basically planets falling apart, meteors, and comets towards hitting the planet Earth. That would also put us back into the prehistoric ice age. He would basically kill out humanity. And that's always a possibility, too, that could happen. But whenever you see these massive freezes come down, and like I said, 45, 50, 60 years ago in Northwest Tennessee, it was nothing to see that happen. But usually whenever it happened, it stayed that way for weeks, if not months at a time. The last time we've seen a big movement pertaining to a drastic change of temperatures like that was in 1983, because I was living in Kenton, Tennessee at the time, living in a smaller trailer than what I'm living in now, having a potbelly stove. And I remember filling the potbelly stove up so full of wood and had it roaring so hot that at night the whole stove, which is made out of cast iron, would actually be glowing all the way down to the legs. And the only way that I could stay warm is by sleeping right beside that potbelly stove, constantly filling it full of wood at all hours of the night, and sleeping in coveralls. In the meantime, all my windows had frosted up to the point that it was nothing but a solid sheet of ice. All my faucets had frozen up, and it was just absolutely incredibly awful. That lasted, give or take, for about a week. and then it warmed back up. Well, this time it's already hit 35, 37 degrees today, if not a little bit warmer. And tomorrow they're claiming it's even going to get warmer. So whenever this guy talks about this massive warm up, you have to ask yourself the question, okay, if we're going to have this massive warm up, hang on a minute. Stop
The
right here.
dramatic warm up. On the other side of this warm front, incredible warmth. LA had their second warmest Christmas, 84 degrees. Miami had their coldest at 50. It was warmer in London on Christmas Day than it was down in Miami.
So what's happening here for this warm up to occur? Because in actuality, the Earth is like 3,000 miles closer to the sun on the opposite side of the Earth, on the opposite side of the equator. But on this side of the Earth, we just went through our solarist towards the shortest day of the year, towards it being so daggum dark. Well, this is supposed to be the coldest part of the planet because we're on the opposite side of the planet, which is on the opposite side of the sun, right? So if the sun was causing the Earth to warm up, first of all, how come it ain't giving us 3rd and 4th degree burns? Second of all, how can the sun be causing these massive warm-ups to be happening and we're on the opposite side of the Earth? Now, some will tell you, oh, it's because of the winds blowing certain direction towards coming out of the south, towards coming out of the Pacific, towards coming up through Mexico and Brazil and places like that. Well, once more, that's what the scientist was looking at. That's what the meteorologist was looking at. They was looking at the outside layers, the exterior layers. There's something else happening other than the massive amount of ice that is getting thinner every year. And even though we can't see it from the satellite, because sometimes the imagery is actually deceiving, sometimes it gives the imagery that the ice is actually increasing, and it may be on the outside layer. But in the meantime, you got ice that goes down into the water, some places probably a half a mile deep, that is steadily melting. A matter of fact, this recent storm that hit, if you look at what happened on Long Island, whenever the conditions was just right with the tides coming up and the winds and etc., you will see some of those homes, some of those beautiful, beautiful homes that is just covered in ice. It almost looks like a piece of art in the way that the ice formigated and froze on every piece of furniture, every tree, all the house, all the exterior of the house, and it was just unbelievable in how much the water table is rising on levels that it is baffling scientists and your meteorologist people. As the ice is steadily melting, it's going to cause the water to increase as far as the water table. That's the only thing that is stabilizing the damage that we're doing to the planet right now. But eventually, whenever the ice cubes get so small that it can no longer resist against the forces of the heat, the heated water, the volcano activity that's going on up underneath the water, eventually what will happen to the oceans is basically the same thing that's happening to our inner waterway systems all over the planet as far as evaporation. And eventually we will start seeing the evaporation of the oceans that will start dwindling, and the water table will start shrinking versus increasing. Once it reaches that level, to the degree that it starts decreasing versus increasing, the oceans and the seas, that's whenever you'll see massive weather patterns that will go beyond anything imaginable, and that's whenever you'll see massive mammoth deaths pertaining to all kinds of different species in the ocean that's going to be dying. These are all things that has been predicted and giving out warnings and giving out some sort of forecasting of the things that was going to occur that even Jesus Christ predicted, much less the Holy Spirit predicted, pertaining to the book of Revelations in the King James Version Bible, that lines up exactly with what's going on in the last chapter of Daniel. That's in correspondence with the Euphrates River drying up. The innermost parts of the earth will start drying up first. And as the water systems dry up, evaporate, it talks about the war of all wars, that there'll be a 1,000,000-man war over in the river Euphrates after it dries up, where people will be basically killing one another because of survival instincts. I don't want to be here during this time. Basically be killing one another, fighting over a piece of meat or a pork chop or whatever, because won't nothing else be able to grow. It basically is becoming inhabitable up onto the planet at this particular time, that there will be a 1,000,000-man army, that in the extent of that 1,000,000-man army, the blood will get as deep as a horse's bridle in the river of Euphrates. Now, if that is not mind-boggling to you, then obviously you are not connected with the sources of Mother Nature. The governor had part of it right. She said, we're fighting a war. We're fighting a war against Mother Nature. In actuality, she's right, figuratively speaking. But whenever you look into the fundamentals of it, it's more than us just being at war with the forces of nature. Why do you say that? Because it was the Luciferian Lucifer that deceived mankind in telling us that we're not doing nothing to the planet. We're not doing nothing to the planet pertaining to the climate deniers. And because we have let this go for so long, now we're seeing extensive damages that's happening in one form or the other in degrees like mankind could never ever begin to imagine. So in essence, it's the adversary, the Luciferian Lucifer, that we're actually at war with, because it was the Luciferian Lucifer that caused mankind to not acknowledge the damages that he was creating. And now, because of these erratical weather patterns that we have created, now it's creating havoc upon to humanity. Well, you know what that Luciferian Lucifer does? Whenever these things happen, just like all them people freezing to death, or people dying of great fires, like out west, or down in places like Australia or whatever, he sits back and he laughs. He laughs. You know why he laughs? Because that's his job, is to kill, steal, and destroy. And if he can cause humanity to destroy itself, well, then he has accomplished his objective. In the meantime, he's trying to blame all these incidences on God by saying, oh, it's an act of God. It's an act of God. Well, it is an act of a supernatural being, but it's not the act of God. It's the act of the Luciferian Lucifer that has manipulated mankind to the degree that now we're seeing these horrendous weather patterns all over the planet. It's not just in America. It's not just in America. We're having places in Alaska right now, their thermofrost that's breaking in to the point that homes are being destroyed. Strong foundations up underneath bridges, and homes are cracking and being destroyed because the ground is thawing out from the inside out, not the outside in. We're on the opposite side of the planet right now, which takes us basically 3,000 miles Actually, it's 6,000 miles, give or take about 7,000 miles, on the opposite side of the planet right now in comparison to, let's say, the Arabian Desert or some of those other areas that it's affecting big time over there on the other side of the equator. And the reason why we know this is because we got data to prove it. Now it's just a matter of convincing these oil tycoons, these oil petroleum people, of what they're doing is basically causing our own demise. And if we don't change this drastically, immediately, we're going to see more erratic weather events that is just as prone of going one way as it is another. Like I said a while ago, to hear where California and Las Vegas and all these areas over here, even up towards Portland and Washington State, was going through blackouts, that had become common. To see where Washington State or Portland, Oregon was getting up to 102, 105 degrees, that's become old hat. The majority of the people ordinarily up in these areas right here don't even have air conditioners in their homes. You know why? Because ordinarily it never gets warm enough to have to use an air conditioner until just recently. Now they have to have air conditioners as well as heaters. Okay? But to see blackouts by the electrical grid system over there, I don't forget now who it is. They've already had major problems over in California toward being sued. That's a common. But to see where the state of Tennessee has to do the same thing in regards towards creating these blackouts, and to see where Texas, a few years ago, their whole grid system broke down because they wasn't associated with all these other grid systems, because they can actually take electricity. They can take electricity that's being made here and bring it over here, or they can take electricity over here and divert it and bring it over here. They can divert it just like water, running water over here, over there, over here, over there. Well, see, Texas wanted to be independent. They wanted to break away from everybody else. Well, they learned their lesson a few years ago. And I don't know if they're still independent or if they're finally given in towards being part of the whole system. Because whenever the system is connected with each other, then you can pile in more electricity ordinarily this way, providing that you got big enough system over here to take it all, to be able to help combat against the problems that they're going through, regardless whether it's extremely, extremely too hot or extremely, extremely too cold. And the reason why I say that is because we have seen Houston and Dallas hit all-time records towards being hotter, over 100 degrees for breaking all-time records, to the point that it actually gets so hot that it causes the foundations in their homes once more to crack and break and crumble. What's happening here? It's a combination. It's a combination with allowing for so many people to come into America that's automatically straining our resources. And it's a combination of what the oil petroleum companies, these oil tycoons, have done towards draining this oil that's basically destabilizing the ecosystem below our feet. And believe it or not, there is an ecosystem below our feet that's supposed to be run a certain way. Once you get to tampering around with all the atoms and all the other things down there that was put there for a reason, and now you're generating all this static creates heat. The heat that's being generated at the center of the core of the earth pertaining to the mantle, you're destabilizing not just the inside of the earth, but now you're destabilizing the outside of the earth, and you're destabilizing the atmosphere above the earth. This is the reason why it talks about sorrows, and it also talks about in the first 4 chapters of Revelations pertaining to massive sicknesses, that we will be cast off into a sick bed, or it talks about how that God will not put upon to us none of the burden to hold fast till we come, because of the miseries that society is going to have to start going through, because it talks about the woe be unto the inhabitants whenever you shall start to see all these things start to develop, start to materialize. These things has been materializing now for quite some times. There's been a lot of professional people. Noah, NORAD, space aviation, they have been looking at all this. But for some reason, they wasn't smart enough to put all the dots together towards what we're actually doing below our feet that is just as crucial as the things that we are doing above our heads. That's the point that I wanted to make in regards to this massive, I think some people even called it a bomb clipper that come down that caused this kind of damage. And God only knows at the houses. I mean, the plumbing industry ought to be busy for probably the next 6 months in the damages that it's caused inside the either interior or exterior of all these homes, which is all the businesses. The plumbing industry should be thriving right now.
And the teens are going to start to rebound. And here's where we're going to have problems with Buffalo. Lows in the 40s. We're already seeing pipes burst all over in many states. Memphis having problems. That's going to be the issue here. And urban flooding with the ice jamming up all of these roadways and, of course, the drainage spots. So, and it's not just Buffalo. A big warm-up is on the way. So we still have more problems ahead.
Seems like it's only just beginning right now. Tom Sater, thank you very, very much. We'll get back to you. Let's discuss what's going on in Buffalo. The Buffalo Police Commissioner, Joseph Gramaglia, is joining us right now. Commissioner, thank you so much for joining us. As you know, the death toll in Erie County, where Buffalo is, has now risen to 27. Do you expect that number could...
That's in one county. That's in one area.
Yes, thanks for having me on, Wolf. Yeah, that number is climbing, and it's going up as we speak. I'm out with Mayor Byron Brown now. We're out around the city. We're stopping at police districts, and we're stopping with our search and rescue teams. Is where we're at right now. Where unfortunately, they are still recovering bodies. Some are natural deaths, but some are also due to exposure.
More than 500 rescues, as you know, Commissioner, have already been conducted so far. What do these search and rescue operations look like in these kinds of horrible circumstances?
It started on Friday when the weather really hit around dinner time, when our stranded motorist calls really started to pick up. We did a coordinated effort with our Department of Public Works with a high lift with police cars behind them to go out and start working through these abandoned vehicles or stranded motorists. We rescued around 65 people by about 10 o'clock that night, Friday night, and then we couldn't do it. We couldn't get through the weather anymore. Saturday, we got out and started getting some search and rescue teams together. We had some of our police officers have snowmobiles and skid steers and other equipment that they brought in on their own, and they just went out and they started working through some of these. So this has been continuing Christmas Day and again today. Our dive team, and you ask why, our scuba dive team, they've got all the warm weather gear. They're used to being on top of the ice. Our SWAT team, we're working with the New York State Police with their SWAT teams, New York State Fire, Parks, Corrections. Everybody is bringing equipment. We've got numerous search and rescue teams. They're divided in various parts of the city, and they're going out working through calls.
So, Commissioner, what should our fellow Buffalonians be doing right now to stay safe?
Stay home. Just stay home. Don't go out. The unfortunate thing is we're seeing a lot of cars that are driving on the street. I don't know where they think they're going, but they are becoming a part of the problem. Some of them are getting stuck. They're blocking our recovery efforts, and unfortunately, that's what we're doing is recovery efforts. We have the fire department that's out doing EMS calls, but we just need people to stay home. Nothing is open. You're not going to go anywhere. You're safest in the house. I couldn't be more proud of the work that our police department is doing, our fire department, our public works, and all of our partners, state police, on and on and on the list. They are doing just absolute, very tough work. It's very tough work, and what they're seeing, it can be demoralizing, but they're doing it.
But if there's no power in the house, no water, no power, and there's kids, little kids especially, what do these folks do?
So, the power company has been doing a great job of getting power back onto a lot of areas. If there's any way they can communicate with anybody, we will come and get them if need be. Obviously they're huddling in, using blankets, whatever they can to stay warm, but we've got warming centers throughout the city. Any calls that come in, any notifications, even third-party calls, we're sending teams to get out and check on folks. We have checked on a lot of houses. Some people don't want to leave. We've gotten others evacuated to warming shelters. Our police stations were seeing a significant amount of people. We have cleared those out and gotten them to other locations.
Commissioner Joseph Gramaglia from Buffalo, thank you so much for what you and your fellow police officers are doing. We are grateful to you. We'll stay in close touch. Thank you very, very much.
All right. That's the reason why I'm very, very concerned about Ruth. Even though she's not up in the Buffalo, New York area, she's still in an area that is substantive of getting those cold temperatures that will get cold and stay cold. Now, I don't remember this. I don't remember this actually at the age of about 5 or 6 years old, but there was a clipper that come down that basically froze people in their very spots up in Chicago on the Dan Ryan that caused about, if I'm not mistaken, about 40 deaths where people just absolutely just froze to death. At the time, we were staying in an old house that Al Capone used to reside in there in Antioch, Illinois. It was a 2-story house with a cellar in it. And I don't think I've ever remembered such of a cold winter before in my entire life. And that may have been the very thing that helped to trigger Dad and my mother towards moving from Chicago back to Tennessee, was because of it being such of a brutal cold winter. And of course, if you didn't have proper clothing, if you didn't have proper heat in conditions like that, because some of those wind chills was like 65, 70 below zero, you would get like 25 below, 30 below zero, and stay that way for weeks and weeks at a time. So to see the weather do like it has recently done, as far as a quick freeze, that's common. But to see it immediately getting warmed up right in behind it 2 or 3 or 4 days later, that's not common. There's no way that that's common. And there's no way that the sun is doing this pertaining to the ozone layer, that scientists has convinced a lot of people in thinking that that was causing the problem. The problem is being caused by the reduction of all the precious resources that were draining from the ground, that ground was an ecosystem in and of itself. And yeah, God's given us enough sense to know the difference between right and wrong. He's given us enough leadway to be able to build roads and build dams and do this and do that. But the world cannot take it much any longer, because basically what we're seeing is the forces of nature throwing a tantrum the same way if it was a infant having teething problems or can't get its milk, or maybe its diaper needs changing. Seeing an infant child basically throw a tantrum, that's what we're seeing this planet Earth and the elements around the Earth and in the Earth doing right now. And the Bible talked about that. There was advisories given by Christ that said that in the last days, flee into the mountains, and if you be up on top of a house, do not return, and to pray that your flight not be in the winter, or to pray that you're not pregnant during the time of this occurrence that's going to take place, because your death will actually be more miserabler. And there's nothing any miserabler than being in a cold environment, to the degree that no matter how many clothes you put on, no matter how many pairs of socks you put on, no matter how much stuff that you do, you cannot get the heart beating enough to warm back the body. There's nothing any miserable than starting to freeze that way. Just like there's nothing any miserable than a group of people that don't have air conditioning, like they was having this past last year over in Europe and places like that, where they had to have these cooling centers where the water was coming towards cooling everybody off. Going from, once more, one extreme to another. Going from one event to another.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Wolf. Appreciate it.
Coming up, what's driving Vladimir Putin to claim he's ready to negotiate? We'll have the latest on that, plus new details emerging right now on a drone that went down deep, deep inside Russian territory.
I'm about to add.
All he's doing is causing insult to injury pertaining to straining the resources and bringing that many more problems into the surface pertaining to the earth dwellers here upon to the planet. All he's doing is making things that much more tougher for the Homo sapiens, for the inhabitants of the people here upon to the planet. And I'm telling you right now, it's Bible that is in the process of fulfilling itself, that could perceive thousands of years ago what mankind was going to be doing to themselves, what humanity was going to be doing to the planet Earth. They have been blinded by the great deceiver, the Luciferian Lucifer, and now we're trying to catch up. We're trying to backpedal. We're trying to crawfish, and it's not working. There hasn't been enough red flags raised. There hasn't been enough teachers and scientists and meteorologists and people that knows various things about the aquadors that's drying up underneath our feet, basically from California through Oklahoma all the way to Texas, to where people's wells is drying up. I was so glad to see it raining after the Mississippi River got so low this year that it broke all kinds of records, and all these rivers and lakes and ponds and water systems and tributaries and watersheds that got so low. And they're still low. The vast majority of the ponds, the vast majority of the tributary systems, your watersheds that produces water for various towns and stuff, they are still not where they should be. Now, all this snow melting up there in Ohio and Indiana and on up to New York and all in other places, that's bound to help. Eventually, it's bound to make its way into the mighty Mississippi. But then what are we going to have to deal with this next year in 2023? Is it going to be as bad, or maybe even going to be worse? You see, I've seen the mighty Mississippi now get extensively low in my lifetime about 5 or 6 different times, which is unprecedented in a lifetime of a human being seeing it get that low. For it to get low twice, that's probably pretty well normal. But to see it get that low 5 or 6 times and I'm still living, I'm liable to see it get low again, maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 more times before I actually die, providing that I live a normal life to 70 plus years. But I predicted or put out an advisory that I was laughed at in the early 90s, that the Mississippi River would begin to start to go dry. In correspondence, in understanding the Bible towards whatever is going to cause one of the biggest bodies of water on the planet pertaining to the river Euphrates. There's 3 or 4 other rivers that's much bigger than and wider and longer than the Mississippi and deeper. But whatever is going to cause these massive waterways to start drying up, the characteristics, odds are, is going to happen all over the planet. It ain't just going to happen in one particular area. It's not just going to happen on one continent. It's probably going to happen on the other 7. So what I was predicting was trying to advance knowledge in helping society and not hurting them. Once more, just like whenever I was up in Kentucky in 2007, that I almost went to jail over for the rest of my life, towards telling people that there was going to be massive electrical disturbances. Whenever you see TVA have to go through blackouts and brownouts, the same as what was going on out west and what has gone on in other continents. Whenever you start seeing these massive electrical disturbances, regardless whether it's entirely too hot or entirely too cold, you're starting to get the ideal towards what I was trying to tell people that almost costed me my liberty up in Northwest Kentucky, especially up around LBL. To think that a group of people actually thought, of course, I have no one to blame but the people here in Weakley County that had tried to get me for being terrorist implemented towards pulling down a fire alarm or crying fire, 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 in which I was in neither one, towards them charging me with falsifying files. It snowballed. It went from Tennessee to Kentucky, from Kentucky to Oklahoma. And man, whenever I come back here in 2014, I was open game, open prey. And my brother and I knew it. And we knew that we was not going to be able to depend upon the authorities towards helping us, even though my brother had a squeaky clean record, other than maybe getting a couple automobile violations, tickets. I've never seen nothing on this level that it was like a pile on, like you know, where they call a pile on whenever they're having a football game, like watching a Super Bowl, and like everybody at one time wants to pile up on this one person. That's what happened here. They done a pile on. And it was one thing to pile on me, because I'm kind of used to being roughed up. I'm kind of used to being violated. I'm used to people not liking me and trying to ruin me and disrespect me and basically destroy me. But David, my brother, wasn't used to that. And whenever all that pressure come down on his life, I'll never be convinced of anything any different that the peer pressure coming from his peers that he thought was the people that cared about him put so much ridiculously pressure, basically tormenting his life, demoralizing his life, after we hired attorneys and tried to get it to stop. I'll never be convinced of anything any different than what these people done helped to put my brother in an early grave, and that includes the law enforcement agencies in Weakley County. That includes Tommy Thomas, Mike Wilson, Tommy Moore, Judge Pence, and any other law enforcement agency that calls themselves a law enforcement agency that took a part in watching this develop in between 2014 and 2017. And I guarantee you, out of about 30 or 35 or 40 deputies that worked for the county at the time up underneath Mike Wilson, will tell you that they had a problem out here that obviously the courts would not or could not take hold over. Because every time there was a problem, it was happening on this side of the road. It was happening on this piece of the property up until my brother died. And that's whenever they decided to flip it. They caught me in a very, very vulnerable position towards me grieving over my brother's death. I had to my brother didn't have no beneficiary. He didn't have nobody in his will, didn't even have a will. I had to go in and do all kinds of legal stuff that ordinarily you never have to do when somebody dies, in addition to taking care of the initial family duties that needed to be taken care of over his death. And to think that they was still piling on, even after he died, driving around here, falsely accusing me of me being part of his death? It was them that was part of his death. That kept coming here. One day my story's going to be told. It's going to be told towards the events that happened right here in Northwest Tennessee. It's going to be told towards what happened to me in Davidson County in Middle Tennessee. It's going to be told towards what happened to me while I was living in Eastern Tennessee whenever they decided to drag me to Davidson County. It's going to be told towards the events that happened in the land between the lakes, up around Livingston County, up around Paducah, Kentucky, and then up around Trigg County, up in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, towards me staying up there for almost a year, and then going to LaGrange, Kentucky. The events that happened in Wheeling, West Virginia, in the early 90s, that's going to be told. The events that happened in 1989 in Madison County, in Jackson, Tennessee, that's going to be told. The events that happened in Washington, D.C. pertaining to Homeland Security, Secret Service, that's going to be told. The events that happened with the telephone call to the White House in 1983 over in Kenton, Tennessee, and then the events that happened pertaining to the authorities in Kenton, Tennessee, that's going to be told. You know, whenever my father, he was good about saying one thing but doing the other. He never practiced what he preached. But whenever he got out here and started advertising about our family's problems, I had one son, according to him, on the Bible, and I had another son on the bottle. And man, he let people know, by and large, what was going on here with the older son, just like the middle-class son. But then in 1993, whenever I started going from paper material to video, as far as cassette and then VHS material, and I started telling the testimonies about some of the events that was occurring out here pertaining to the Jackson abusiveness that was happening, that's whenever Bobby Jackson got so daggone mad that he loaded up his two boys while I was living in Jackson, Tennessee, and was going to go to collision specialists and take a baseball bat and beat my head in until I was dead. And I basically had to take and put charges on him, and I still got the paperwork to prove it, where I had to file paperwork for him to stay away from me. But that's what ticked him off, is that I was telling the truth about what had occurred. The same thing that basically ticked my son off is that my son thought that he was going to be exempt from not being touched by all this. And because he's my son, and because he's part of my testimony, and I'm telling my testimony, he's now sold up like an old cat towards not wanting to have nothing to do with me. And he does this, I've noticed him now for the past 7 or 8, 10 years. There's a pattern with my son. I don't know why. But long about Christmas time, from Thanksgiving to Christmas, just about the time whenever you're supposed to be all cozy with your family, that's the time that he pulls away from me. And that's the time whenever I get the ugly side out of my son. That's the time whenever he won't answer none of my telephone calls. He falsely accuses me towards violating his trust. He brings up all this other stuff just about the time of the documentary of the birth of Christ. So what's that going on with him? Same thing that was going on with his grandfather. He's irritated that I haven't taken this setting down. He's irritated that I hadn't already died. Now, he'll tell you, I don't wish my father to die. I don't want my dad to die. He'll tell you that. And maybe consciously speaking, he may be telling the truth. But subconsciously speaking, something within him actually dreads the fact that I'm still breathing. Just like about half of the neighborhood around here, the people that know me, they actually despise the fact whenever they meet me on the road because I'm still living. According to them, the bastard is still living. How come he's still living? Well, you think maybe it had something to do with God? You see, I was given up on the age of basically birth. whenever they discovered that I had a polycystic kidney, my parents refused to take me home because they didn't want to become too attached to me because they thought that I was going to die. They didn't think I was going to make it. Well, God had his hand upon me, and I made it. I stayed in the hospital for about 2.5, 3 months, but I made it through getting a polycystic kidney removed in 1961, that at that time, operating on an infant was almost unheard of. It was unprecedented because doctors wasn't near as advanced back then. And if I wasn't up in the Chicago northern area, I'm pretty sure I would have died. If she would have had me down here in the South, I don't think I'd have made it. It may have been that God would have brought some doctor into the area that was just there at the right time at the right place, kind of like Dr. Summenshaker that was working up here at Martin at that time in 1983 whenever that car rolled over on top of me. But ordinarily, you don't operate on infants. Today, they can take an infant half as big of a shoebox and nurture it and put it on life support machine and start feeding it. And the next thing you know, that little 2.5, 3 pound baby becomes a 7, 8 pound baby that can leave the hospital after about 3 or 4 months and look just as normal as any other kid. Well, 35, 40, 50, 60 years ago, they couldn't do that. Now they can do that. But whenever I was born, I was given up on. I was given up on again and again and again. Just like whenever those 9 tapes went to the White House, somebody must have scratched their head and thought to themselves, well, this poor bastard has went through this, and this. Odds are he probably ain't going to live another few more years. And that was in 1988. This is soon to be 20 and 23. You're looking at a span of about 35 years. I'm still living. Have they withered me? Yes. Have they given me new scars? Absolutely. Have I been fighting a psychological, emotional, spiritual warfare? Absolutely. If I was born in another era in America, let's say in the 14 or 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, they would have probably done an lobotomy on the back of my brain to the point that part of my nerve endings would not be able to control my body, and I would basically become a vegetable. Or they would have chemically seduced me so much with either Thorazine or some other kind of psychiatric medication coming from the psychiatric world that they would have destroyed me that way. And that's exactly what my father wanted me to do in 1983 whenever the car rolled over on top of me. Whenever I come back from Bolivar, man, did he ever preach to high heavens, are you on your medication? Are you on your medication? Did you take your meds? Did you take your meds? He was wanting me to get on Thorazine so badly that he couldn't even sleep good at night. And the person that needed to be on Thorazine wasn't his son, Dennis James Jackson. It was the maniac that was going around here telling everybody about his son, and it was him that couldn't control his anger issues, that even to this day, his grandson is still in denial about towards the sickness that my father had. It was James Robert Jackson that needed to be put on some sort of medication to help his behavior, to help him his anger management issues. But did anybody that was growing up in this area at that time, the Whites, the Morgans, the Jacobses, the Hills, the Willises, the Bakers, I could go on and on and on with names, Cobles, Coopers, Halls, the Nelsons. Did any of those people care at that time what was going on with old Bob or what was going on with old Bob's family? No. They was scared of old Bob. And they wasn't going to intervene in old Bob's life because old Bob was looked upon as being a World War II hero. So as far as they was concerned, as long as old Bob left air, a little bit of air left in his boy's lungs, that was fine. That was fine. I have never been so let down by a group of individuals that I have right here in Northwest Tennessee. And to think that I come back here in 2014 and all hell busted loose in my life, that basically I was picking up on the aftermath of the hell that had already done bursted out in my family's life again and again and again, right here on this, at this particular address. To think that I had to walk into a beehive like this. A beehive. If I would have known that all this was going on, if I would have known that the Wiccans had built a castle less than a quarter of a mile away from here, a bunch of devil-worshipping people, occultists, if I would have known that these people had done already burnt their bridges to the point that they was going to get me if I come back here, like Harold Roberts said, that you'll probably go through an initiation period now, Dennis. And boy, was he ever right. Initiation period to the point of seeing a 51-year-old man die that I couldn't do nothing about other than try to defend him and myself, and couldn't get none of the law enforcement, the people that claim that they're good, sensible, godly people in this area, supposed to be civilized people, couldn't get them to lift a finger. Couldn't get them to basically do nothing. And you wonder how come I make the statements that I make whenever I see things evolving the way that they're evolving towards me making the statements and saying it couldn't have happened to a better group of people? Quit wondering. Now, does that mean that this is what I wanted? No. I wanted peace. I wanted a revival. I wanted utopia. But for the past 30 some odd years, these people didn't want to support that. They didn't want to back that. And now they have digging their own graves, not only for themselves, but for their children and their children's children. And God only knows how much more suffering that's going to happen to little children, just like you're looking right there, trying to survive, getting whatever he's getting out of that water. How many more other children are going to have to suffer on account of what has occurred here? I end my case the day after Christmas, year 2022. I thought that these things needed to be addressed by looking at the weather and what has occurred, what I knew that occurred 2 weeks ago pertaining to the foliage not releasing its foliage like it should have had. Seeing these extremes going on again and again and again, I just felt like that basically it's my duty to speak up. And you can continue to keep ignoring me if you want to, like you have been for the past 35 years. Or you can get off your behindies to the point of me seeing something done about all this. In the meantime, we put up with gun violence. We put up with the drugs. We put up with the drug overdoses. We put up with the suicides. We put up with all the malicious violence going on pertaining to the criminal activity. You know what it showed a while ago as far as people breaking into that store and looting out of that store? If that was to went on in the early 1900s or even the mid 1900s, do you have any idea what those people back then would have done to people like that towards taking advantage of those people and going in and looting their store? Do you have any idea what those people would have done to people like that? Times is hard. And they're only going to get harder. And they're only going to get tougher if we don't pray, and if we don't build, and if we don't wrap our heads around these problems and trying to make society a better world rather than making it a worser one. Thank you for letting me talk. God bless you. And basically, this will be probably the ending of my videos for the year 2022. I just put out something a while ago towards basically graduating, pertaining to me still being able to walk, talk, stand on my own 2 feet, and tell my
That
story.
$20 goes.
Thanks again, and good luck to all of us. And want to say I love you in the Lord. Want to say shalom, which means peace. Want to say God bless America, God bless our troops, and God bless our endeavors towards where not only America but the world goes from this moment on in walking off into a new year, basically turning another page of where we go as a society. God bless you and good luck to all of us. May heaven help us all. And shalom.